everyone, and a massive welcome to the second episode here on InfoSec Live of the Human CISO. My name's Simon Linstead, the host and founder of the InfoSec Live community. And before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping as usual for those of you that are regular watchers. Please like and subscribe. And we do try and make these events as interactive as possible. So make sure you drop any questions in the chat. And a bit about the InfoSec Live community quickly for those that don't know who we are. We're an independent social network community of 3,000 cyber professionals, all sharing best ideas and practice. And we've been creating content now on YouTube for just under a year, and super excited to announce that as of last week, so I've got a fly in here that I'm not going crazy, we've now qualified for the YouTube Partner Program with over 2,000 subscribers, 5,000 hours of content viewed. So a massive thank you to everyone in our amazing community for supporting us. And you should see now new and exciting ways to support the YouTube community while you're tuning in for the show. So the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat is now there. If you'd like your question bumped up to the top to be noticed, please take advantage of the super stickers in the chat. And we also have YouTube membership options as a way for our community to regularly support our content by clicking that Join Now button at the top of the page. And a quick recap on what that gives you. Being a premium member gives you access to special perks, members-only live chats, special badges, and priority replies to any live stream comments. Pro member gets all of the previous perks along with early access to new videos, member shoutouts, photos and status updates, and exclusive member-only videos. And those who've opted for our elite to the top level, and a massive thank you. I've got a little graphic here actually I want to bring up for this. Let me just do this quickly. Make sure I do this properly. There we go. A massive thank you to Joshua Copeland, who is our first elite top member. And watch this space. We're throwing up a live stream soon to help support Josh and his Real Men Wear Pink campaign to start raising some funds for breast cancer awareness. So super excited for that. And again, going back to the elite, you get all of the previous perks with a personal connection with myself on social media, exclusive behind the scenes content, including bloopers, and I've got loads of them, as you can imagine, members only polls, and an exclusive dedicated individual company shout out on up to 4 live streams per month. So again, a massive thank you for supporting the community. If you can't afford to support in a financial way, no problem. Being here and engaging with the streams is more than enough. So our aim is to keep bringing you that valuable and informative content. And this new series is here to help that by continuing the theme of sharing those best ideas and practice. And today, Simon's going to stop rambling and we're taking a deep dive into security culture and much more. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Scott Wright, CEO and founder of ClickArmor. Let's bring him on. Here he is. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Simon. Great to be here again.
I know. It's good to have you here again as well. We actually had a quick catch up about an hour ago, so it doesn't seem like long since I've spoke to you at all. Before we dig in, loads of you in the chat. I just want to say, again, a massive thank you to all of you. Gregor, you're here every time. Salunio, great to see you. Dead Boy, thank you so much. Aaron Lax, my man, thank you so much. And Musa Ayub, brilliant. Thank you for tuning in. And for those, I know there's some in the chat who haven't watched these before. Scott, do you want to just give people a bit of background on yourself? Everyone's heard enough about me, but let's hear about you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Gregor, and everybody who was here last week. We did do one last week, but I'll give you a really quick recap of who I am and why I'm here, why I'm somehow qualified to talk about this stuff. But I'm CEO of ClickArmor, which is a really interesting software company that created a platform for security awareness training that is fully gamified from top to bottom. It's purpose built to teach awareness rather than just using some kind of learning management system. And the nice thing about it is it's got a much better effect on security culture than what, and that's what we're talking about today, than some of the other methods that may be out there. We'll talk about those. I won't call them out just yet. But my background is I'm a veteran cybersecurity consultant, specializing really for the last 15 years or so in human information security risks. So all the kinds of things that involve people doing things improperly, maybe not knowingly, or maybe sometimes intentionally, but also being vulnerable to things like phishing and social engineering attacks. So I've studied that. I've done projects like the Honey Stick project, where I dropped USB drives everywhere and mobile phones, which get expensive, but it's nice to have a sponsor when you can do that.
I'd love to hear more about the USB.
Yeah, we could do an episode
take that
honey
in.
stick project. That
Yes.
I haven't talked about it in a long time, but it was
Excellent.
fun, and it would be fun to do it again if I could get another sponsor for it. But it was really interesting.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
don't know if it helps. I've got a box of 2 FA keys here that I got
oh
donated.
yeah,
Now, I won't name the name of the company because that would be wrong. But I've got a box here that I'm sure you could do something with. So we'll have a chat
yeah. You know
afterwards.
what those are good for is for social engineering
Yeah.
penetration tests, right? You put them on a keychain with a USB, and people think it's a real one rather than just some a malicious one. So
Yeah.
those are fun things that you learn when you start
I
dealing
think
with
I've got one
human
of these as
vulnerability.
well
There you
sitting
go.
around.
Oh, a rubber ducky. I got one of those too somewhere here.
Actually, I'll tell you what I'll do for the next person who signs up to a pro membership. I will post you out a rubber
Oh,
ducky.
nice.
I think they're about $50.
Those are
I've
very
had this.
cool. Now, if you don't know what a rubber ducky is, we should tell people.
I'm glad you're explaining that.
So, yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've used it, but essentially it's a USB, looks like a USB, but it really is a keyboard that's programmed with any kind of text or script that you want to put on it, that it will inject as if it was a keyboard. So it's just like you're typing in. So it really, you can enter an entire script really quickly and run it within whatever operating system the key is connected
So
into.
basically, it makes whatever device you plug it into think that it's a keyboard, basically.
Yeah, so it's really good
Yeah.
for exfiltrating data through using scripts or creating a remote connection, to an attacker server or website or something like that. But it's just an innocuous looking little USB drive, but just happens to type
It's
in
quite
some
interesting when
very
you open them
sketchy
up.
text.
When you open them up, Scott, they've got a lot in them though. There's a
Yeah,
lot going on in there, isn't there?
there is. Yeah, and it takes a while to configure them to do what you want, but they're very, very powerful. From a
Yeah,
company
I think
called
you get
Hack5. They've got lots of
do
cool stuff.
you
They
get
also
ducky scripts
Hack5
with it,
also
don't you? I
sends
think.
the sorry, I was just going to say Hack5 also sells the pineapple, the Wi-Fi pineapple, which we
Yes.
could talk about as well. I did a little project with one of those as well, as which basically is a malicious Wi-Fi hotspot
And what
that you can
about
play around with and do.
I don't know if you're getting a bit glitchy if you can hear me okay, but it looks like you're breaking up on your camera a bit, Scott. I'm not sure what's going on.
Oh, not again. Okay.
Only a little bit.
Sorry
But
about
have you
that.
heard about the new ones, the flippers, which seem to do an awful lot of things? I think
I have
they
not
are.
yet. Too
No,
busy.
well, maybe we'll see. I've got one on order, but I think there's a fairly long wait. And once I got it through, I was going to try and do a quick demo, but I would need an expert involved to help with that.
Well, we may be able to do that next time. So
Excellent. Well,
anyway,
look,
all that rambling was about where I came from and the kinds of fun things that I like to do. And the Click Armor platform we created a couple of years ago is really fun. And if people want to see it at the end of this, maybe we'll do a little bit of a live demo of it, and it'll sort of tie in nicely with the topic of security culture, because there are a lot of aspects of security culture people don't really think about very much. And I think there's some good questions people might ask here, or things that we can ask people's opinion of.
I think let's encourage that to start with. So if you have got any questions at any point, please do drop them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as much as I can. And if you could help my approaching 50-year-old eyes by marking the question with a Q at the start, I'll definitely spot it. And again, if you want to take advantage of the super stickers, I'll definitely see it because you get a big sticker in front. But Scott, let's talk about security culture then. What is security culture?
Wow, it's different for almost every different person. But what's nice, I actually recently read a book called The Security Culture Playbook, written by Kai Rohr and Perry Carpenter. Many people here may have actually read it, and I actually recommend it. I was a little bit skeptical that it might be trying to push too much of a vendor's position on the whole topic,
Yeah.
and there was a little bit of it, but I think it actually includes a lot of really good discussion. And those are some things I'd like to bring into the discussion today as well. So when you talk about what is security culture, as I said, it means a lot of different things to different people. One of the things they studied in the book was they had done a research survey around what do you think security culture is. And 29% of the respondents said it was compliance with policies. And 24% said it was security issues. 22% said it was recognizing that security is a shared responsibility. 14% said it was establishing formal groups of people that could help influence security decisions. and 12% said it was that security was embedded into the organization. And interestingly, they chose the last one as the most appropriate one that they wanted to focus on for the book. And I think probably that is a reasonable assumption. The main thing that I have with defining it in that way is you're really defining more of a factor, but not really something that is measurable as much as I would like. So I kind of wanted to see a little bit more discrete, objective viewpoint of how would you actually measure security culture, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well.
I think
So
the fact, Scott, that there was so many different responses to the answer to the
yeah,
question, what is
yeah,
security culture? I think
and I
that
was
proves.
surprised by some of them. Like where did they get that from, right?
I
So
just want to point out that Dead Boy in the chat said that
yeah.
we're giving off some serious Max Headroom vibes, and I don't know
Oh,
if you can
sorry about that,
remember.
folks.
Can
I
you
don't know.
remember Max Headroom, Scott?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah, I
sure.
don't know if I can do the head glitch for you, Dead Boy, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's double max. Yeah.
yeah, brilliant.
Um,
Sorry, go on.
I have to do some serious work on my my fiber internet connection, which is supposed to be really fast, but it's apparently not. So I
So I think
apologize
you're
for that.
okay now. It seems okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the result is we did have a lot of different responses on what is security culture. I actually, when I did my talk last time, I sort of discussed this a little bit in the model that went around the circle of risk. So we have the governance that starts out with decisions on investment, going to people, process, technology, and that really results in some output or an outcome that is affecting the risk, and that risk feeds back and has to be factored in on future investments. But when it comes to security culture, my view is it's really just the sum total of all human to human and human to technology interactions, right? So it's everything about what we do, and that's maybe not as measurable as some of the things that we put here, but the result from that culture is really then, as I talked about last week, an ultimate level of vulnerability that affects the risk of the organization. So I think that security culture is not exactly security awareness, or it's not exactly human vulnerability, but it definitely factors into those outcomes. So it's still a very vague topic, but I think it's something that we all kind of recognize as being an important thing that we look at to say it's a good culture or it's a bad culture.
Yeah, I think I've experienced all, and not necessarily just in the security space, but culture is so important within organizations, and it does tend to be led from the top, doesn't it, Scott? And I think that's part of the discussion is getting the C-suite and the leaders in the firm to engage and buy into the fact of how
Yeah.
important that is. And we see it in the press every day, more and more firms who aren't prepared, who haven't got that security culture. And it makes you wonder what we need to see for people to start sitting up and listening a bit more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the way I would put it, it was interesting. You said that it's led from the top. It can be led from the top, but if the top abdicates, it's led from the bottom,
Yeah.
and that means if the top level executives don't really put any thought into what they want the culture to be, or what kinds of decisions they make impact the culture, then people will make their own decisions, and there will be behaviors developing that you didn't expect or didn't want. And so I think you're right. It can be led by the top, and I think in a good organization with a good security culture, it is led from the top for sure. But one thing that the book said that I thought was really true, and that is every organization has a security culture. It's just whether or not it's a good one.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah. Wow. So just quickly in the chat there, I want to say a quick thanks to Gregor for the super sticker. Really, really appreciate that. And Moose has made a comment down the bottom there: leaders only buy in after a breach rather than being proactive. And it does, maybe not all of them, but it definitely does seem that. We've got a question as well from Dead Boy.
Yeah.
Question for Scott. Let me bring that one up so my aging
Yeah, I
eyes
love
can
this
see that.
question.
There we go. As a security leader active in the community, we often hear others in the industry say, people are, oh, I hate that. People are the weakest link. I detest this too, Dead Boy, but how do you combat it?
Yeah,
That's a
I
really
mean,
good question.
the statement "people are the weakest link" is just trying to characterize the type of vulnerabilities that exist in the organization, and it's a matter of whether or not you are showing any respect to the people in the organization. When you call them the weakest link, they may take that the wrong way. I think the intent is, what we really mean to say is, they are the most likely vulnerability that an attacker will target.
Yeah.
That's
So
and
surely then, as security professionals, it's our job to make sure that they are aware and they do understand, rather than just saying they're useless and they'll never get it, which I think is a common thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think there are definitely different schools of thought, from security professionals I talk to, and many of them will say, "Well, we shouldn't have to worry about what the humans or the employees are doing. They shouldn't have to worry about clicking on a link." And we may have talked about this last time. I don't think that's coming anytime soon,
No.
right? That level of technological advancement, and so we're really just talking about vulnerability. And there are so many different paths an attacker can take into the organization. And sometimes it's complex, a series of events where we talk about the kill chain, the different opportunities where you could stop an attack. And certainly the humans are maybe one of the points where attacks are most likely to succeed.
Yeah.
And so, the characterization of humans as the weakest link, I don't mind it personally, but I think it can be offensive to people when you're calling them weak, right? So we just have to be a little bit careful on how we describe it. But I think it's also a matter of whether we're blaming people or blaming the organization. It's like everybody has a responsibility for security in the organization. I think we all recognize that. And then the question becomes, how do we get people motivated to recognize that they have a responsibility that impacts them personally in the long term? Sometimes people are just thinking so short term that they don't have time, or they have never thought about the fact that if they create a breach that's so bad that the company goes under, then they're going to lose their job, right? They
Yeah.
don't even anticipate that that's a possibility. So they have to be brought in step by step to recognize. Actually, it's something I did a webinar, and it's on my YouTube channel about a while ago, and that is, um, there are two types of awareness. There's awareness that I am vulnerable, and then there's awareness of what I should be doing to avoid,
Yeah.
being victimized.
And I
And so
think
I think, go
I
ahead.
think Dead Boy must be reading my mind, because he keeps putting comments in just before I say something. And the thing I was going to say, which is similar to what you said, Dead Boy, is that surely your employees should become the first line of your defense.
Yeah,
That's
I
that's what could be
exactly.
happening.
I,
Yeah.
I often use first and last line, right? Because first line of defense
Oh,
is if you
first
can.
and best for Dead Boy. Look, nearly.
First and best. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that could, yeah. We'll just leave it at that. So what I just say, it's could be the last line of defense, because if malicious attack, a malware infection occurs and gets spread around the organization, if the technology doesn't detect it, humans should, right? Something is going to ultimately cause an impact that you are going to have to act on. So at some point, if the technology and the humans failed originally and the attack is successful, some human is going to have to detect it and report it.
Absolutely. So what else? I noticed some comments in the chat there about
Mhm.
two-factor authentication. Now,
Yeah.
I know Roger Grimes has recently done quite a bit on, how easy it is to breach that. And again, it's back to us being human, isn't it? And taking advantage of some of those vectors. But one of the things I keep seeing now is the terminology 3FA. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I've heard that either. I've heard of 1.5 factors, but I have not heard of 3FA. I don't think. I mean, certainly you could put three. You could put a biometric. You could put a time-based token and a password if you want. That would, to me, I guess, mean 3-factor authentication.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's 2-factor authentication is certainly being exploited now more than it was before. But it's that continuous cat and mouse game, right? I mean, passwords worked okay for a while until attackers learned to steal passwords pretty
yeah,
efficiently and reuse them, or do password stuffing. But now we have multi-factor authentication, and that definitely made it harder. The amateur attacker wasn't able to really be successful as much, but now certainly they are. They're automating some of those things, and they're pretty efficient at capturing, a man in the middle to in real time break into somebody's account. And so I think it's just going to continue to evolve. So I think multi-factor is here to stay for sure, but it's just a question of how do we actually keep making it harder for attackers.
It's another buzzword, three-factor, for the vendors out there. We'll see it all over RSAC next year
Yeah.
on
Does
every
anybody
other
have a
channel.
definition for what three-factor is other than what I said?
Yeah, it'd be interesting, Aaron, actually, if you do. While we're doing that, let's talk about how security culture can hurt or help a security program. Let's focus on that for a bit, Scott.
Right. So yeah, you can think about security culture, as I said before, as every organization has a state, they're in of security culture, and that may not be a great culture. Maybe you've had, executives that ignored the human side of vulnerabilities for too long, and people are just cynical about anything that's going to be done. So that's certainly, an area you want to avoid. When it comes to how can we have a good security culture, it's really trying to promote the ideas that I said earlier that the book adopted, which is that security is embedded into the organization. And I think what that means is every decision made by individuals tends to be guided by security rather than, productivity or getting things done on a deadline. Every time you're asked to do something urgently, maybe it's legitimate 90% of the time, but sometimes when it's an attacker, they're going to ask for something legitimate. It's going to look a little bit, or they're going to ask for something urgently. It's going to look a little bit different than it was when it was urgent or when it was legitimate. Sorry, getting my words mixed up.
That's all right. That's because Moose has just put the words Halle Berry in the chat, which has just thrown me as well. Thanks for
Okay,
that,
that
Moose.
distracted us. Yeah. So, the idea of being able to improve a security culture means you've got to be able to measure it to start with. You have to be able to say, what are the things that I can look around, I can observe, I can measure, I can get feedback from people on what their views are. And one of the things that was actually covered well in the book by Kai Rohr was the idea of a security maturity model. And within that model, there are different ways you can measure things and observe things. So things like attitudes that people have, you can do that through a questionnaire, really. Behaviors you can observe. You can say, how many times did people click on these things? Cognition, or really just understanding. So you can test people in different ways. Communication, which is how well are people communicating when something bad happens? Maybe it's the reporting part of security. And compliance, you can measure non-compliances again, and the norms and people's responsibilities. So if you have things defined well for people in terms of their responsibilities, all these different dimensions sort of provide a perspective on what the security culture looks like. And so if you can start to create a model for measuring each of those things, then you would actually be able to characterize whether you're in a good state or a bad state, right? And that's typically where we would start. And I am totally in agreement with Kai and Perry on the framework that they put forward in the book from that point of view.
So how can a decent training program help with that security culture, Scott?
Well, I think a lot of us have been through poor training programs, that don't necessarily motivate us. And the outcomes are pretty clear. If you're not motivated to take the training in the first place, you're not going to learn. And if you're not learning, then you're still vulnerable, right? So the training has to be a number of things in order to help the security culture. It has to be engaging, so people will pay attention. It has to be, to some degree, interactive, because you have to hold people's attention, right? You can't just say it's a fun video and then I forgot what it was actually trying to teach me, right? You have to have some level of interactivity to keep people thinking as they go through it. You also have to be able to put people into a sort of simulated risk environment where they can practice safely and not be given bad penalties for making a decision, because you know what they'll do as soon as you do that? They will disengage, right? They will stop taking the training, or they will just discount it and not feel that it's important. So all those different little elements within the training can help create a more positive security culture.
I suppose the other point that you mentioned last week was around relevancy of training. You know, there's
Hmm.
lots of different roles out there, people doing different jobs, and not the same one size fits all approach clearly isn't working at the moment. So I think the fact that it's tailored can make a difference, can't it?
Absolutely. People, if they don't recognize or see themselves or their situation in the training, again, it becomes irrelevant, like you said, and they will discount it, if not start to ignore it. I like Dead Boy's comment about the carrot and not the stick. We talk about that a lot with our customers because it's not always about the technology or the platform. We can provide carrots in the platform to make it more fun and engage people better. But there are some holdouts who will never complete the training unless you use the stick,
Yeah.
and that's actually a management problem. We're not going to deploy the stick within the training. It's got to
No.
be it's got to be done from, as you said, the top down. And so it's really a mix between the carrot and the stick. Use the carrot as much as you can to get as much participation as you can, and then you need the stick to get the people over the finish line sometimes.
I suppose relating this point from Musa, do you think the focus is more on having tick box frameworks rather than actual processes? Going back to the other one, processes and procedures, you could relate this to training as well, though, couldn't you? You know, it's
Oh yeah, absolutely.
unless the leadership in the organization has belief in the training themselves, I
Yeah.
think it's a struggle to then get the staff to engage.
Yeah, for sure. The checkbox is a big problem because where I come from in my past years doing risk assessments, we talked about assurance, and assurance means how confident am I that the measurements I'm getting are true, or
Yeah.
that they will actually be reflected in reality. And so when you do training that people can just click through, or they can start a video and put it up in the corner of their screen and go and work on other things, there's no assurance that even though they completed it, it's going to actually change their behavior. And
Yeah.
so that's a really important problem. Similarly, and you'll hear me mention this occasionally about live phishing tests, especially if you follow me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I've been on a bit of a run on why live phishing tests suck this week
Yeah.
or this
Oh,
month.
go on, please,
Um,
please expand.
well, I want to hear from as many people as possible. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me your stories about why phishing tests suck. I really want to hear more about that. But
Let me drop
that,
your link in.
yeah, for sure. And the reason there is again assurance, because I don't know exactly who's driving it. I'm trying to find out. And again, if anybody can reach out and connect me with either the auditor framework developers or the insurance questionnaire developers who say you must have live phishing tests, right? If that's what you're basing your insurance risks on, then you might be at more risk than you think you are, right? And so if you're only telling people they must do a phishing test and they don't have to actually provide assurance that people are really changing behavior, that's a problem. And that can be really hard and expensive to do in a live phishing test world or environment because of all the things that I'm posting on my LinkedIn. If you go check out those, you'll hear all the different reasons why it's really hard to get good value from live phishing tests. But all this to say, if you had a
Oh, you're frozen.
would provide better assurance. So,
You're
for
back.
example, you could
Oh, he's gone. Keeps doing this to me. Did this earlier as well, Scott. Let me bring you back on. Hold on.
tell
Stop
me when
running
I'm back.
away.
Oh man, I'm your troubled child, I guess.
I've got 6 already. I really don't need another one. I should
Yeah,
just repeat, I love my children. I love my children. I love my children. There we go.
yeah. That's cool. So, I mean, I don't want this to be how people remember me, but I guess that's the way it is, right?
I want it is. I wanted
I'm
to
always
say a
disconnecting.
big shout out to Steve in the audience, a future guest coming on the CISO experience. Thanks ever so much for joining today. And I see that you need a fire Elmo emoji. I have got space for an extra custom emoji on this stream. So by the time we get to your episode of the CISO experience, I'll make sure we've got an Elmo fire emoji for you, Steve. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry, Scott. Back to you. Do you mind if I throw another question at you? Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
So we've talked about the importance of having the right security culture, but who's ultimately responsible for managing that?
Wow. You know how to ask the tough questions, don't you?
Sorry. Yeah. It's
Well,
because I don't have to answer them. That's why.
it's really the top down, right? I mean, as you said,
Mm.
there are certain things that will happen themselves if the top doesn't take leadership. In a lot of projects where I worked early in my security career, it was in the Canadian federal government, and every security policy said the head of the organization is ultimately responsible for security,
Yeah.
and they can delegate people to create plans and approve plans, but the head is actually responsible for everything. And so that's where the buck stops. But in a practical sense, they will delegate responsibility. And so it is important to understand who in the organization should really have input as a stakeholder. And I think that will typically be the CISO as probably the lead for information security.
Yeah.
And I think they have to work carefully with the human resources department on the culture side, because you're going to see, for example, if you're doing phishing simulations or phishing tests that are harmful to people, it can damage their mental health. It can cause them a lot of stress, and it can cause them to do things that might put the company at risk legally, right? So
Yeah.
there's definitely an HR angle where they need to be aware of the plans that you're having and what kind of outcome they might expect that to have on people. One thing I find a lot of, even today on LinkedIn, guy that I connected to, Jim Guckin, pointed out that it's sometimes really hard because the IT team doesn't really respond or doesn't recognize that the employees have certain vulnerabilities or certain emotions, even, right? And it's a matter of not understanding the psychology or the psychological drivers that people are facing in a work environment, and the cultural issues. And so if the IT team doesn't take that time and isn't directed by the CISO and by the HR department, who hopefully can provide a different perspective, then it's going to be really hard to build a good security culture.
I think I completely agree, and I want to drop a link in here. I did do a post on this earlier on in the week, and it was in relation to people. Get my words out, Simon. It is nearly 11 here. I'm allowed to stumble, I suppose. It's about people embarking on a journey of self-discovery before they start looking for work. Finding out who you are, finding out where your skills are, what you're good at, what you're going to fit into. And I think you could argue, couldn't you, for the C-suite, security leaders, whoever, getting your team to conduct one of these personality tests, like the 16 personalities test,
Yes. Yeah, for
which is
sure.
it Myers-Briggs, I think, it's based on
Yeah,
that
there's
one.
Myers-Briggs, there's DISC, there are other ones as well that are, I think, really important. And in fact, that's exactly what I was thinking of when I mentioned, that the IT team doesn't always appreciate people's psychological states or
Yeah.
they're definitely their drivers. What causes them to
I mean,
take
that's
actions or
a
make
lack of
decisions.
empathy problem as well, though, isn't it? Let's be honest, which is
Yeah, I
rife
mean that can
everywhere.
come from overwork. I've heard posts recently about why do CISOs get so stressed, right? Nobody understands. Did we talk about that last week? Like compared to
I
us.
think was last week was the Joe was his name, wasn't it? The former Uber CISO who had a
Yes,
really
yes.
bad day
Joe
last
Sullivan. Yeah,
Thursday.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So I think we might.
he'd been in court for a couple of years, right? And
Yeah.
just the decision made. But we actually covered this on the Shared Security Show, which is a podcast that I do weekly with Tom Eston and Kevin Johnson. We
And where
talked
is
about
that?
that
Where
this
can
week.
we find that, Scott?
It's called sharedsecurity.net.
And get it in here.
And yeah, we're in our 200 and something episode now.
Oh,
We've been
wow.
doing it since 2009. But we had a good chat this week about Joe Sullivan, the CISO. And it wasn't so much that the CISOs are now at so much risk and liability. The accusations or the allegations or whatever he's found guilty of was actually more about obstruction and
Yeah.
covering things up. And that's never a good thing, right?
No. No,
So
definitely not. And I think you've seen real polarization with regards to the responses on LinkedIn, from people saying, "Don't worry, Joe, it'll be all right," to other people saying, "How can you condone it? He's done wrong." And I think from a person who's made mistakes in the past myself, he's gone. Typical. Just to start talking about me. It's easy to judge other people without the full story and the full picture. And for me, I'm going to refrain on any comment because I haven't seen the full court transcript and I don't know what's happened. But
Yeah.
yes, I completely agree. Don't hide stuff. It's suicide, I think, is the answer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously a stressful job, a lot of gray area. I think that it doesn't get an equivalent executive role to something like a CFO. I mean, there are a lot of ways you can compare them and make them equal, but a CFO
Yeah.
is looking at numbers and, should we include this number or not, and stuff like that, right? A CISO, if they're being held responsible for not having quite the amount of firewall rules we should have had in place, that's a very much grayer area. So I
Yeah.
don't necessarily believe that CISOs should be held quite as liable for their potential mistakes. It's the
It's
whole
funny.
return on
You being a
security
CISO
investment
saying
problem.
that, surprising, Scott.
Yeah. It's the whole return on security investment problem,
Yeah.
which is if security is working well, you can't measure it.
Yeah, it's a very good point, actually. And it's funny you should say that because my next question, I think you might have frozen, so I might be about to lose you again. Yep, there you go. You'll be back though. You'll be back. I know you will. I'm going to complain to your broadband provider, by the way, later. I'm going
Yes,
to send a
please do.
message in.
Please do.
Yeah, please name
Um,
and shame, Scott. We can moan about
yeah.
them online. So yeah, my next question, which you led into extremely nicely there, was how can security culture be measured?
Yeah. So those things that I talked about earlier are really a mix of observable uh, events. So things like, are people clicking on too many malicious links? You're getting malware infections that are triggered by employees. So you can measure the rate of uh, violations of policies and things like that. You can also gather information by surveys. So sometimes that doesn't work too well because people are too busy to do surveys. One of the nice things that we actually put in the ClickArmor platform is embedded survey questions. So as you're doing a game or a lesson, you may just realize, hey, I just got some points. And then you're asked a question, anything? Or, you can actually have
Yeah,
some free-form text to say, have you ever experienced this before? And if so, tell us about it, right? And you can actually gather information when people are already engaged and in a good frame of mind, versus trying to send out a survey saying, we want to get your opinion on stuff. And sometimes people will be very vocal on surveys if things are
if they're
very bad,
anonymous. Yeah,
if they're anonymous, if things are bad and they want to talk about it, and if they haven't been so bad for so long that people are just cynical and just
yeah.
figure it's not worth actually putting any thought into. But when you first engage on doing a measurement of security culture, it's likely that you're going to get some feedback, some valuable feedback. I'm not going to say good feedback. It's not guaranteed that it'll be good feedback, but you will get feedback the first time because it's something new that people actually finally have a chance to vent about. And that may be fun reading, but there's a methodology that I think is really good. There's it's actually used for marketing purposes called the Ask method,
Yeah,
by a guy named Ryan Levesque.
yeah,
And he uses a two-step method where you ask some sort of broad questions first to put things into buckets. What kind of category am I putting this person in? And then you ask more detailed questions about their opinions on things and the things that affect them. And that helps you really sort of zero in on what are the main issues around the culture, for example, that you're trying to explore. So I really like that approach.
okay, thank you. While we're on that, it's relevant. Joe Evangelisto, who's a CISO for I think it's Tango over in the US. We did a private event earlier this week for actually there's a couple of people in the audience who were there for on soft skills and a couple of the areas on there. I'll share it actually with you quickly because
Yeah.
where are we? Window, if I can do it. Microsoft Edge tab. There we go. Okay, can you see that? So this is the InfoSec Live community. This is the homepage here, but down the
I
left-hand
don't I
side.
don't see it.
Oh, do you not?
No.
Oh,
I don't know if
what?
anybody else
Oh
does.
no, I know what it is. I haven't clicked the button. Wait a minute. I've got to do this. Look. There we go.
There we go.
So it's a small screen, and I can't turn the chat off because I'll lose all your comments. But this is the InfoSec Live community, and in the
Right.
community there, on the premium section on the left, it says premium. It doesn't actually cost anything. All of this is free. There's lots of different resources, but
Oh, wow.
the one I want to draw people's attention to is this one. Is a course I put together last year, and it's actually it's there to help. It's there to help people improve their communication skills, and a lot of this comes from a course, a hypnotherapy course I did to become a qualified hypnotherapist, not to do it as a job, but simply, I don't know if anyone who's watching knows much about hypnotherapy, but to be hypnotized, 50% of the battle is to build trust with that person and build rapport. And all of the skills that I learned within that course and in the last 30 years of sales, I've tried to put in here. And there's a whole section about building self-confidence, building rapport, mirroring body language, a bit about what dialogue is, and actually having a conversation where we're both listening to each other and engaged, and we both kind of looking for the same outcome rather than a
Right.
conversation, not a dialogue where people are waiting to be able to jump in the next word, which I'm guilty of sometimes. But there's lots in here, and there's another bit about listening skills and the importance of active listening. And the reason I've shared that just now, I'll take it off the screen, but
Mhm.
I've shared it with you because if there's anyone watching who are looking to try and improve those and haven't got the great soft essential skills, it's only about an hour long course. Please do take advantage of that in the InfoSec Live community. I'll drop the invite link. Here we go, in the chat. There we go, and then I'll
That's
get back
cool.
to you with another
Yeah,
question.
we were just finishing the question around, can security culture be changed? And I was saying that you have to be able to measure it first, which is true. But once you've measured it, what can you do to change it? And there's a really interesting aspect of security culture or corporate culture in general, which is that yes, it's possible to change the culture, but it's almost it's really difficult to change it in the direction you want it to be.
Yeah,
So you can make changes that are going to impact people's views and their actions, perhaps, but you don't know there's because there are so many variables, right? With every single person, there are a lot of variables, and
yeah.
so it
Every
is
and
possible.
every day, what my emotional state is like a roller coaster, Scott. I'll be honest with you. I blame the ADHD and the children, but some days you feel massively positive. Other days you've got your head up your backside, haven't you? And we all have that from time to time. Not
Yep.
physically,
Yep.
but
Yeah. But yeah, so it is possible to change security culture, but it has to be done in a way that you're expecting. Maybe your first attempt won't work the way you think it will. And you have
yeah,
to constantly monitor it and try to adjust it. So it's not a simple thing. It does take organizational design skills, which is actually something I studied a long time ago in my MBA program before I got into cybersecurity. But so it's I guess that sort of it makes sense why I'm so focused on this stuff.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely contributes and supports everything that you're doing in a massive way. And I've spoken to a few CISOs. The one I spoke to today had a philosophy background, which I thought was really interesting and actually more relatable than you'd probably initially think when it comes
Yeah,
to dealing with
there's
a day-to-day job.
there's such a broad background of people that can go into security. I mean, we may talk about that at some point, careers, but when, when I started in security, there were very few job ads that said you must have 10 years of experience in security because it didn't
It
really
wasn't.
exist.
Yeah.
Information security didn't exist. Yeah.
Excuse
So
me.
anyway, that's a fun part of it. So any other questions?
Let's have a look in the chat. If not, what I'm going to do is we've got 15 minutes left. Let me get rid of that one. If you have got a question, Steve's mentioned that active listening is hard to master, and I completely agree. It really, 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 really is. And you're right, it is absolutely critical to that leadership role. And I can't see any questions in the chat. So, how
Mhm.
about you give all of our viewers a little flash of your Click Armor training platform?
I can try to do that. Sure.
I reckon we can
Hopefully
do
I
that.
won't get disconnected.
Well, we'll see. There should be a share button at the bottom
Yeah. And I
somewhere,
can pick a
Scott, I
screen
think.
and
And if
tell
I
me
had my
if you guys
juggling
can.
balls here, I could do a quick bit of juggling, but they're downstairs. I'll make sure I get them for the next stream. There we
Cool.
go.
So can you see my screen now?
No, but we can now.
Interesting. Oh. Oh, you've got
I hope
to
that's I hope that's
allow it.
yes to the juggling, Steve, in the thing. I'm not that good, but I will show you some next time, I promise. So yeah, let me. What I'm going to do, everyone, I'm going to turn the chat off now because the screen's too small for my old eyes to see. So keep jumping in. We'll see it. It's just not going to display on the screen. So
Mm.
there we go. Right, let's give us a demo. Come on, Scott.
All right, thanks. So the Click Armor platform is actually, as I said, purpose built for awareness training, and you can see that when you first came in. It's nothing like, and this is the best comment we get from anybody we do a demo for. It's like unlike anything I've ever seen before, and so I'm hoping that I didn't drop you guys. Looks like you've frozen, but
No, oh no, I'm here. I think
Oh,
you've
good.
you've
Okay.
frozen, but we can hear you, Scott.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if you can still see the screen, that's great.
Yep.
So yeah, the dashboard, is pretty engaging. It's got lots of information that people can use, including the leaderboard, which is a lot of fun, right? You've got anonymous names. We've learned that people don't always like to have their name on the leaderboard if they're not a gamer and they're not confident, but people do like to know where they are relative to everybody else.
Yeah.
And you can tell they're really motivated to to get back in there and try again. And it's also
Do
nice
you
to
know what,
have,
Scott?
yeah,
If you can hear me, this is
yes,
because I think you've frozen again. I can hear you though. This is
yes.
what I like the most about your platform. Having a very competitive streak
Mhm.
in my personality, this is what
Yep.
engaged me, and I find it difficult to focus on anything I'm not interested in. But I have spent some time on this platform and thinking I was had a reasonable knowledge of threats, etc. I did
Yeah.
fail some of those tests. I'd just like to admit online.
Well, you wouldn't be the only professional security professional. It's interesting that we're able to get such a good response. I was surprised I didn't get all the answers, but it's not so hard that it demotivates people. Everybody sort of likes a challenge as long as it's, as I said before, not a stupid challenge.
Yeah.
So when I'll just take you for a quick tour into our
Mm.
phishing course, which is fun as well because it is structured in a way that breaks things down so people can learn about, instead of saying be suspicious of, unexpected emails. Well, what does that mean? So we actually take people through the sender information, the links, the body content, and how to analyze each one. And after each one, we do a little simulation, which we call a virtual inbox simulation. But before we get to the simulations, we actually use what we call learning challenge model, which allows people to, they can just guess if they want, but they can also explore and learn more and get more points as they explore. So that's really
Excellent.
a fun way to actually get people's engagement and build their confidence. And then when they've actually gone through that, I'm going to take you right to the end so you can see what we do sometimes is we hide parts of the email that we can
Yeah.
get people to, oops, sorry, hopefully this will load. My slow internet connection may be slowing things down.
Well, actually, Steve's just mentioned in the chat that his missus is getting hangry, so he's got to jump
Yeah,
out. But he's loved the conversation, and he's off to raise a GoFundMe page for your bandwidth, Scott. So
there we go. Well, yeah, I won't take that personally, That's so. Just to finish off this, I don't want to hold people for too long, but the simulated or what we call virtualization is really different. This is rather than attacking people, we're immersively taking them into an inbox where they can explore, the links, the senders, and make choices about what's safe or suspicious, get feedback. So this is really the key and the heart of the whole interactivity things to keep people engaged and really let them test things in a safe environment so that they can get feedback without feeling stupid and have a little bit of fun too. Because if, for example, this is a fun one because she is working in a remote office, getting a call from the security office saying there's a virus on the loose. We need you to download a patch so that you don't get infected. Well, that's, the old sort of Microsoft support scam in a
yeah,
very different way. But if you actually don't ask the right questions here, you may not be able to detect whether it's malicious or not. So let's say she asks for a clue that says, can I get a file number so I can ask the service desk? That's the right question for her to ask. But the answer she gets back is, sorry, that's classified information. which is pretty suspicious, right? You should
Yeah.
be able to get a service desk ticket. So then they say, do you want to trust me or not? And if she said, I don't think so, she would get points because she shouldn't trust the guy. But if she says, okay, I'm going to go ahead, then, oh, she gets some ransomware, right? Now,
Love
she
that.
doesn't lose a life. She doesn't lose points. It's just a fun way to say, hey, you know what? That was not the right answer. And we'll give you some feedback a little bit later about, what you should or shouldn't be doing. So this is our social simulation environment, which really lets us simulate everything outside of phishing. Whether it's text or voice or in person, this is the kind of stuff that is really powerful for engaging people to learn and simulating this. So if you imagine when I talked about assurance, if we can measure how many times people get these things right, rather than just whether they clicked on a link in a test message once a month, right?
Yeah.
There's a huge difference in the assurance level there.
It's
So I'm
it's
going to
it's the
stop
whole
sharing
it's the
now.
whole it's the engaged learning process though, isn't it, Scott? Having
Yeah, yeah,
having something that's gamified where there's a leaderboard, I think has got massive benefits to it. And again, it was the irony, it was the ones that you were just demonstrating them that I'd slipped up on. And if I cast my mind back 8 years to no, 6 years, let me get this right.
yeah.
When my wife was my office manager, we had a 3 week spate of email attacks to her
Oh boy.
asking from me, with the masked email, asking to transfer funds quickly. And on
Yeah,
one
yeah,
occasion, she was this close. She sent me a message saying, "I'll do that for you now." And if I hadn't
yes,
have read that text message from her, she would have
yeah.
transferred £10,000 to a different
Yikes.
account. Yeah, it's
Wow.
scary, isn't
Yeah,
it?
sometimes people just get away by the skin of their teeth, to to avoid getting caught. But a lot of people do get caught, and it can be expensive. I had one customer that had said they went on vacation. The boss went on vacation, and an employee got an email from apparently the boss's Gmail account because he wasn't connected to his work account, asking
Yeah.
him to go buy gift cards at a hardware store. And $7,000 later, the yeah. So
I'll
unfortunately,
tell you, I'll show you my the best hack that's ever happened to me has happened by my children actually, and
oh,
this
okay.
is a lesson for any parent who gets their child an iPhone and has their payment details on it. So I'll start off with my now 17-year-old. When he was probably 13, 12 maybe, he played Clash of Clans, I think it was, on his phone,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I had a bill come through for $845 for gems, which then instigated a fairly serious conversation with him about why we don't spend dad's money, especially not the company credit card that I'd put on there as well, which was really stupid because I hadn't noticed the money coming out again because I
Right.
hadn't been
Right.
keeping an eye on that. And then fast forward 4 years, my now 14-year-old, I can't even remember the game, but he did it was Skins. That was it on what's the game that they play?
Oh. Oh.
Fortnite. Fortnite.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was Skins on Fortnite, and I think he racked up a bill of £1,160. So
Jeez.
it took for me to get bitten twice to learn that your children can't be trusted with your bank details on their iPhones.
Yeah, I've got a story like that too. One of my family, while I was out having a nice dinner, I came home and he was in tears because his he had lost all his homework, and he had tried to install Kali Linux on his laptop where he does his homework, and it just overwrote the whole whole
Oh,
distro.
no. Yeah, I've been there.
Wasn't a financial cost, but it was a big cost.
Yeah, no, absolutely, an emotional one, I bet, from a parent
Good
point of
lesson
view.
learned too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're drawing to a close. Let's wrap things up then. So
Yeah.
I've just put the link at the bottom for anyone who wants to have a look and check out ClickArmor. I know you
Yeah.
can't click on it, but you can hopefully read that. clickarmor.ca/quickstart. Put it in the browser. Have a look. Also, please, please, please do connect with myself and Scott on LinkedIn. I see a
Yeah.
couple of you have already sent connection requests out to Scott, so thank you for that. And I believe if you want to come back, everyone, we're going to come back and do this again next week. Scott, what are you going to be talking about next week?
Next week, I was thinking maybe digging a little deeper into maybe cyber insurance or law or something
Ooh.
like that. Haven't really made up our mind, but let's take a little poll and have people suggest some topics for that.
I think that's a great idea. What I'll do, Aaron's just mentioned about putting a invite link for the community in the chat, so I'll just drop one of those in. But I'll do a poll within InfoSec
Yeah,
Live and also one on LinkedIn maybe tomorrow to see what people want to hear about. Maybe you could give me some options to put on the poll, Scott, so I make
yeah, I
sure I get
can.
them right.
We'll connect on that with the
Y-
other ideas too. And we just wanted to say thanks for setting up that community, the InfoSec Live community, Simon. I just joined it myself and
Thank
getting
you. I
lots
saw.
of welcomes and activity on my first question there. So that was great.
I
Thanks
really
everybody.
appreciate it. And for anyone who's watching who has applied for the new InfoSec Live scholarship scheme, the winners of that will be announced this Saturday at the Meet the Members event, which we hold at 8 p.m. That's British summertime when it's not really, it's freezing here now, but 8 o'clock UK, which I think would be 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you've got a chance and you're free at that time on Saturday, jump in, get to meet some of the members and find out who's won the scholarship. And what we're going to be doing for those people is creating bespoke pathways for them for careers in cyber rather than an off the shelf boot camp. We're going to take it a step back, do the 16 personalities, get them linked up with industry leaders, have a look at the NIST mapping, looking at the roles, and try and do it properly and work out what people are actually good at and how they can relate that to the industry. So I'm super, super
Awesome.
excited for that. And it's only through people who've tuned in tonight, guests like you, Scott, that's made all that possible, bringing the awareness out there to the community. So thank you again to everyone for tuning in, jumping in with questions in the chat. Big thanks to Gregor for the super sticker. Big love
Yeah.
to you, Gregor, for that. And if anyone else has got any suggestions for future content, please do send me a message directly. I'll be delighted to hear. Scott, any wise words before we go?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining us and look forward to chatting next time on the show.
Brilliant. Watch out for that poll. I'll drop it tomorrow. Scott, it's been a pleasure. Everyone, catch you soon.